rock and roll. It is the first Monday in the month of May, and we're all getting a little nutty because it turns out people need other people quite a bit, and so the less physical and personal interaction we have, a lot of times the nuttier we get. But I spent the last since I invented this this thing in a way to try to connect with people. We spent the entire time we've been talking about the exile of Israel and how that, in my opinion, has a lot of overlaps, a lot of similarities with being a people that are in quarantine or that are isolated, or whatever language you want to use. But I think it's kind of run its course, and I was going to shift gears. One of the elders here and I have had an ongoing conversation about what it means to share good news and what is evangelism. And I think so. For the foreseeable future, I want to spend these Mondays and Thursdays talking about that idea. We're going to spend some time on our Facebook Lives talking about that. But I had this thought today when I was working out. We are called to be good news people in a world of bad news. And, I had that thought, and then I thought, that's kind of a good phrase. I'm not sure I came up with that. And so, being the responsible citizen I am, I went to Google, and it turns out I didn't come up with that phrase at all. Somebody else did. And I'm not sure who exactly invented it, but a theologian named Michael Horton has used it. And Michael Horton is, in my opinion, a very good theologian. He has written some good books. One of them is called For Calvinism, and he wrote it with one of my professors from seminary, who wrote kind of a companion to that, which is called Against Calvinism, and they enjoyed a collegial conversation about the topic of Calvinism. But apparently Michael Horton used this phrase in a book that is about the gospel-driven life, and then a guy named Terry Christ from Hillsong. I don't know him. I think a lot of our kind of music worship geeks might know who that is, but both of those people have used this just from the front page of Google. So I didn't invent it, but I don't really know exactly what it is that they both said about it, and so I'm gonna do my own thing about it, and I don't know if it'll mesh with what they say or not. But the question I was thinking about is how do we as Christians, how are we called to live in a world that we're kind of inundated with bad news from the moment we get up in the morning? And if you're like me, you've been following all the news, but there's this new news about what's being called a murder hornet, and apparently these things are about 2 inches large, and they just come at you, and I don't know, the thing is, I'm not too concerned about it because I haven't Googled it. I've just seen what people share on Facebook, and and that brings to light, I think, the interesting conundrum that is Facebook, right? Because there's this great line in The Office, a few, way back in The Office, and there's millions of great lines in The Office, obviously, but at one point, Michael Scott is talking about Wikipedia, and he says, "This thing is awesome. You're getting the truth because anybody can go on here and edit it." So, and at the time, it was kind of a joke, but it turns out that is actually kind of true now. Enough people have edited Wikipedia, and enough people have had input that it's actually kind of a legitimate resource for most things. But Facebook is not that. And so the things you see on Facebook, maybe they're true, maybe they're not. And for the most part, we don't really know. But here's where all this wraps together. I was thinking about being good news people in a world of bad news. All we see largely is bad news after bad news. But as Christians, we believe that God is for us. We believe that God has created a way for human beings to know Him. We believe that God has created a path to redemption and a path to reconciliation. And so one of the big things that we're called to do in that is to proclaim that gospel, proclaim that good news. And And here's what's interesting about that good news. Throughout the New Testament, one of the phrases that is used repeatedly is this phrase, Jesus is Lord. Now, whenever we say that, a lot of times we mean it in kind of an esoteric, abstract, separate from real life sense, right? And so we mean, well, I like Jesus and I'm happy to sing to him on Sundays. But in the first century, if you were to say Jesus is Lord, there's I think, a pretty heavy implication that you're also saying Caesar is not Lord, and Herod is not Lord, and whoever else is also not Lord. And so whenever you made this proclamation that Jesus is Lord, you're saying, yeah, I believe that he is the ruler of the world, but that also means he's the ruler of me. And so what that means is that our actions then have to conform to what we're saying. Otherwise, we are saying by our actions that we don't actually believe that Jesus is Lord. And this has some interesting implications, I think, for the way that we live in the 21st century. So a lot of times what I think we think of when we think of proclaiming the truth, proclaiming the gospel, is that this is simply something we have to say out loud. And then once we've said it, then we've done our part, and we can kind of go on living the same kind of life as everybody else, and that's no big deal. But what if the call on our lives is that sharing the good news, sharing the gospel, means that we are living a different kind of life than everyone else? So think about it this way. I know this has been a hard time for a lot of people, but what do we believe life is really about? Right? And so is it possible that this time of exile, this time of quarantine, this time of harsh challenge, this time of our Sundays are all messed up and our worship is messed up and our personal lives feel messed up, and we lack continuity, we lack connection like we normally need. And so in all that, it's so easy to focus on the bad news. But what if we were kingdom people in a world like that? And so what if we, by our very lives, we proclaimed that God has made us whole? What if we proclaimed that all those things that we thought we needed, we actually don't need after all? What if our lives proclaimed that we could be the light of the world wherever we are, that we don't have to come somewhere on Sunday mornings? Yeah, we love to do that, and that's great. It is a good thing, and we look forward to the day that we can do that again. But what if our lives were such that they proclaimed the good news that God is for us, God is for our neighbors, God is for the people that live around us? What if they proclaimed that in such a countercultural way that we said, yeah, I'm really suffering right now. This has been hard for me, but I believe God is for me, and I believe that he's going to pull me through this, and I believe that there's hope on the other side of this. And so what if in the moments of difficulty, we should certainly proclaim with our lips, but what if we proclaimed with our lives, hey, God is for you. Everyone around us, God is for you. God loves you, and he wants to bring you home. I think a lot about the good news, and to me the best news is that Jesus has a table, and at that table he's invited everyone to come and to feast with him. And he doesn't have coat check at the door, right? And he's not saying, hey, did you start behaving the right way before you came to sit at the table? No, he's saying, hey, there's enough. There's food for any who will eat. And sure, once you start to eat, that's going to change you. That's going to change your life. But the good news is that Jesus welcomes any who want to come and sit at his table. And so what if we, in the way that we interacted with our neighbors in this time, a lot of us are stuck at home a lot. What if we interacted with our neighbors in such a way that our very lives were proclaiming the good news? So we are trying to work on something, we see our neighbors working on something, and we say, hey, you know what? I'll wait to do what I need to do. Let me help you do what you need to do. What if our very lives said, hey, I know that you got laid off. Let me share some food with you. What if we proclaimed the good news of the gospel with our very lives? And so today, I feel a little disjointed today, so I hope that kind of makes sense. But but one of the questions, the things that I want to start kind of looking at from different angles in this is what does it mean to be proclaimers of good news in a world that has completely changed? And I don't mean by the coronavirus. I mean by moves in philosophy and theology, by a world that doesn't accept the same standards that we have built a lot of our Christian faith around. And so what if we become people of the good news in this changing, ever-changing world? How does that look specifically in 2020, but even beyond that? And so the hope is that this conversation is evolving and changing, and that we're bringing new things to light. Nothing I ever say is going to be perfect, so I totally understand that, and there's obviously going to be whole swaths of stuff that I miss. The hope is to begin a conversation. The brilliance, I think, of the priesthood of believers is that this is not, I am completely incapable of fleshing all this out myself, but God has called us all to be priests in that, and so we all flesh this out in our lives, and so we are all called to be theologians that flesh this out for one another, and we work it out together, and we share this good news not only in our speech, but also in our very lives. So today I want to encourage you to think about how can your speech and your life, how can they line up in such a way that they both proclaim the good news that God is for us. And if God is for us, who can be against us? Hope you enjoy your Monday. Hope you enjoy the sunshine. I don't know, while it lasts. See ya.